I slept on this movie for too long, but ended up watching it anyways because of my friend Milana and girls from the book club. It also has received 7 Oscars like a few weeks ago, so maybe there is something to it. I was not expecting what I saw though. If you haven't watched the movie yet, I highly recommend you to put this video on pause and return to it later not to spoil the first impression. Another disclaimer, cinematography is not the field of my expertise, and in this video, I will not comment on the quality of the movie or any specific characteristics of it. Instead, I will share with you an observation which was made likely due to me being a psychology student and sometimes looking for things that are not there. But I do think that there is something to it. So, let's conduct a little experiment, shall we? Before you get scared and leave, let me explain you what I mean by that. If you wish to participate, simply watch the video and then answer one question. Does it make sense? Hear me out, this movie seems to be like a litmus test of sort that can change its meaning depending on what you're going through in life. One can argue that any piece of art can have multiple interpretations. And that's true. Art by definition is highly subjective and can be perceived and analyzed from many different points of view. However, it's only now that I have experienced this phenomenon firsthand. Well, maybe that wasn't the first time, but it definitely was the most emotional one. Because when I watched the movie, I saw such a specific issue at its core, which essentially was a reflection of my trauma, and made me cry almost in an utter despair. Later, talking to my boyfriend, I realized that what he saw was his unresolved issue in life. So, I hypothesized that Everything Everywhere All at Once shows you what is the one thing that still hurts you the most, that you seem not to be able to resolve, and is just left aside, sitting there on its own without you even realizing it. Or maybe not. I tried to figure it out and posted on my Instagram, but responses were quite confusing and didn't really help, to be honest. I had a few conversations in my DMs though, which inevitably made me more interested in this idea. I did some research and turns out that while working on the movie, its directors, Dan Kwan and Daniel Schneider, were surprised themselves that the movie was relatable to so many different groups of people. In the interview with The Deadline, Dan Kwan said, "I feel like what has been really interesting about this film and working on it and releasing it is that every few months I'll discover a new audience, if that makes sense. And then, at every test screen, there would be a surprising new person from a new perspective who would be like, I see myself in this movie because of this reason, or I see myself in this movie because of this other reason." And so slowly, over the course of our edit, we started to feel the sense that this film was going to connect with certain people. And if they saw it during the screen tests, I definitely could see it in the end result of the movie. It seems to have so many layers, which is why I tried to decipher different perspectives showcased in this movie. Here, I will present you a bunch of different themes that I came up also with the help of my friends. Some of these are more specific than others, and it's likely that there are even more of those that have been left out, but let's see what there is to it. The list will start with more general themes and gradually move into more personal topics. And I'd like to begin with a theme that Daniel Schneider has called one of the key metaphors in the movie in his interview with /film, growing up with the internet. If you saw this with the main idea explored in the movie, you're likely to be a parent of a child or a teenager or young adult yourself, gradually realizing the consequences of the exposure you've had for the most part of your life. I'm not gonna be the one to remind you what short time-lapsed videos are doing to your dopamine baseline level. Probably you already know it. Overexposure eventually leads to boredom, leaving you craving more without ever feeling satisfied. Similarly to joy proclaiming that
nothing matters
at the end of the day. And the movie feels exhausting, doesn't it? Weirdly similar to those times when I spent hours distracting myself on TikTok, ending up with no power to finish the task I actually had to do in the first place. Speaking of distracting yourself, the next theme that I could distinguish was not being able to choose your path in life and distracting yourself on the go. This one is not so obvious, but that's what Evelyn seems to go through when we find out about all the things she does besides her laundry business in the middle of the Talks edition. In this particular life, she, according to Alpha Waymond, is bad at everything. I won't say that not working your dream job and having so many hobbies makes you bad at everything. For me, it's more like a story of the unrealized potential, if I may call it this way. If this resonated with you, I want you to know that you're not alone. In the age of uncertainty that we live in, the process of individuation became much harder than it was for our ancestors. I'm not an anthropologist though, but my recent interest in the metamodernism led me to believe that this century is both full of possibilities to grow, yet also filled with numerous distractions. I call the next theme, there are no right or wrong choices. If you think that this is the core idea explored in the movie, I can assume that you yourself had to make an important decision at some point in your life. And maybe it was recently, maybe it was a while ago, you still find yourself pondering whether it was the right thing to choose. Maybe you're not completely satisfied with the outcome. Well, Everything Everywhere All at Once shatters the idea that there are right or wrong choices. If you are a reader or simply feel like digging deeper into this idea of multiverses and major decisions in life, I can recommend you the book by Matt Haig called The Midnight Library. I do think that the idea was better portrayed in Everything Everywhere All at Once, but the book does give you something to think about while reading a story of a 35-year-old Nora stuck at a crossroads in life. Which eventually leads to the next idea that I called All the Roads Not Taken. This theme comments on the existential part of the choice and decision making. It's this feeling that no matter what you choose, there will be still something left out and never experienced. It definitely is connected to the previous theme, if not being the exact same thing. But if the previous theme was more self-assuring at its core, this one seems to be more demoralizing. So if this is what you saw in this movie, how are you? I'm asking you this question because another theme that follows this one is clinical depression. Or rather, its portrayal in the movie. I've heard some people completely, at least in my opinion, misinterpret the motivation of Jobu Tubaki, aka calling her a spoiled child and all of those other things. This isn't doing justice to what was seen on screen. They completely overlook the fact that she's severely depressed. And this is the most evident in this scene.
You know why I actually built the bagel? It wasn't to destroy everything. It was to destroy myself.
We can see that this was a cry for help, an outward expression of all the chaos she had within her. For Joy, this pain stems from not being accepted by her mother. This theme goes together with other themes like being different, feeling lonely, not living up to expectations, and many, many more. But I will not expand on each of them in this video so that it doesn't become a full documentary. I'm sorry to hear that this theme resonated with you the most, if it did. Nobody deserves to be rejected and feel inadequate no matter what they did. But this seems to be a common practice of parenting that goes on from generations. Speaking of generations, next theme is generational trauma. I don't know if this theme really needs a further explanation. Every family has different trauma that runs in their generation. Same for my family. I feel like it really impacted the way my grandmother raised my mother, which also inevitably impacted the way my mother raised me and my sisters. And this is also a theme that is explored in the movie, mother-daughter relationship. In the interview with the Deadline, Deng Kwan said, "The fact that the movie was about mother came later. As we were exploring draft after draft, we slowly realized how much easier it was for us to write to our mothers. We have very strong-willed, interesting mothers who have left an impression on us. And so writing to that just felt way more personal and way more interesting, and something that we talk about a lot. It became a movie that we hadn't seen before. And I hadn't seen a movie like that before as well." What was striking in this movie, though, I could simultaneously feel both perspective of the mother and her daughter. One of my friends talked about this one-sidedness in the relationship between Evelyn and Joy, like the way Evelyn is really surprised that her daughter feels a certain way. She never noticed the problem. She never really cared to see if there was one. Well, I guess it's more about time to introduce next theme. Nothing matters but family. I guess this was the main thing for many people, which also seemed quite natural, considering the ending. I don't know if I can say something original, so maybe this theme was like an affirmation for those who already have family as one of their core values in life. And it's hard for me not to mention at least briefly another theme, which is in an opposition to this one. Being a career-oriented woman with no family. While the character played by Jamie Lee Curtis may seem extremely unsympathetic at first, we do get to see a different side of the auditor closer to an end of the movie. I think this shouldn't be a surprise since that is the intention. As Kwan explained in the interview with the Deadline, the hardest challenge to us was an empathy challenge, and so we thought, okay, who would it be hardest to empathize with? The awful, crotchety auditor. And I think the execution was beautiful since it really empathized with the character and the way she changed in front of our eyes with a bit of love. Next theme, marriage problems. Here we can see many manifestations of this theme. Lack of communication, intimacy, and interest in one another. Wanting the other person to change, not seeing each other for who they are, and many more. I think in part these problems are also connected with the other theme, life in immigration. Here in particular was explored the experience of a Chinese couple moving to America and building their life from scratch in the unknown land. According to Schneider, the idea of the movie having Chinese-American point of view was not clear from the beginning. It's quite evident that the crew did an amazing job on props, costumes, and decorations. Kwan based the opening shot of Evelyn Wong on the cluttered lives of his many aunts and uncles. The Chinese phone book and weird glooming butterfly display are lifted directly from his childhood. The theme of immigration also goes hand in hand with topics like being first-generation immigrant, giving up your life for the sake of your kids, starting over from scratch, cultural differences, and many more. But I also will not expand on each of them in this video. If you managed to finish it and find it difficult to answer the question I posed in the introduction, I understand it. And like the movie makers who created the movie that was supposed to confuse the audience, I tried to make sense of it. And if for you this was even more chaotic, I also understand it. But does it make it in the slightest sense? Do you also feel like the movie is both exhausting and relieving to watch at the same time? Did you also see your trauma? Did any of these themes felt extremely personal? I hope that the cathartic experience that the movie brought to me was also some sort of affirmation to other people, or maybe a push to do something about their problem. On that note, I would like to end this slightly messy video essay. See you sometime soon. Bye.